Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Jordan here. I'm excited to be with you. We're up here in Angola. I'm really just enjoying a time of rest here at the beginning of the summer. It's been so good. We've been enjoying some good weather. It's been great so far. We've been getting outside. We've even gone to the zoo a couple of times as a family. It's been great. Here, I'll just go ahead and cue the obligatory Judah at the zoo photo. Yep, there it is. You're welcome. We're really enjoying the beginning of summer here. But I'm also really excited to get the beginning of our summer series rolling, and we're diving into Mark and a big chunk of Paul's writings this summer as well. It's going to be really, really good. First, let me just kind of give a bit of info on Mark's account of the gospel, just to give us a little bit of background, because I think that's helpful sometimes to know. So Mark's account is the shortest of the Gospels, written by Mark, obviously, but informed by a lot of eyewitness accounts, especially the Apostle Peter. So here's a lot of things from the disciples and shares those things with us. And part of the reason that it was shorter, that it's a shorter gospel, is that it was written to the Gentile believers. So this would be written to people like you and me as well. But particularly the Romans at that time was written to in an effort to show that Jesus' might and his miracles prove that he is God in the flesh. And so it focused primarily, specifically on the ministry of Jesus, and that time to put his power on display. His power over creation, his power over demons, over sickness, and even over death. Mark puts those things on display. So ultimately, he kind of implores us and his readers to respond to the invitation to follow the all-powerful Son of God into eternity with God the Father. That's what Mark's gospel is about. And as followers or disciples, we're now sent in the power of God to join in the work of God. So Mark would eventually go on to join Paul and Barnabas as they established the New Testament church we read about in Acts. And then Paul would go on to write the letters that we're going to read later this summer, and we're excited for that. So there you go. Brief intro to Mark, his gospel. And this week we're going to dive into Mark 1 through 4. And if you haven't finished that yet, that's okay, but I encourage you to just go ahead and pause this video right now and go do some reading before we dive in, just so that you're ready for all of this. But there is one thing in particular that I want to share that just really stuck out to me as I read these 4 chapters, and it really starts in chapter 1. In verses 16 through 20, Jesus calls his first disciples. And I think his wording as he does that just really communicates something very powerful for us as well. He sees Simon, Peter, and Andrew throwing their net into the lake. They're off fishing, the two of them, and he tells them, "Come, follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people." He doesn't tell them he's going to turn them into great preachers or evangelists, even though that's eventually how they will turn out. That's not what he invites them to. His invitation makes it very clear that they are fishermen, and he knows that. I know who you guys are. His invitation is one that says, I know who you are. I know how I've created you. I know what skills I've given you to make an impact for my kingdom. It says you are uniquely gifted to do exactly what I want you to do. Jesus invites them to that. In chapter 2, in verses 13 through 17, we see something similar as Jesus invites Levi, the tax collector, to follow him. Upon calling Levi to follow, as he walks by and Levi's in the tax collector's booth, and he says, "Come on, Levi, follow me." Jesus then goes and he eats a meal and he spends time with Levi and all of his sinful tax-collecting friends. That's who he goes and he hangs out with. Which doesn't make the religious leaders very happy, but that's what Jesus does. He spends time with these people. And in doing so, we see that Levi is uniquely positioned to make an impact. Just like Peter and Andrew and James and John, those fishermen were uniquely gifted, Levi is uniquely positioned to make an impact. Jesus doesn't just invite Levi to up and leave his community of people, to step away from that, to ignore that. He actually uses those relationships to draw people closer to him. And I love that. So these men that he's called are uniquely gifted, uniquely made, and uniquely positioned for God's kingdom work. Those are the guys that Jesus is calling. And finally, in chapter 4, we read the story of the sower. And this farmer goes out and he sows seed, and it lands on 4 different soils. Many of us, if we've grown up in the church, we're very familiar with this story. And each soil, in turn, either produces or it doesn't, based on the conditions surrounding the soil. Many times when this story is told, I don't think we quite grasp the characters of the story. We start looking for ourselves among the soils and trying to figure out, how good is the soil of my heart? How good is my soil? Am I the good soil or am I not? And I think in doing so, I think a lot of times we're looking in the wrong place. We're looking for ourselves in the wrong place. Because I think God has invited us to be a farmer. God has invited us to do something different. Not just to receive the word as the soil, but he invites us to be a farmer. And that's not always going to look perfect. I mean, read the story. What farmer, what good farmer that knows what he's doing is going to throw seed in all of these random places? It won't be perfect. But God invites us into it. He invites us to scatter the word wherever we are so that he can make an impact. So that his word will make an impact. And it will. It does. In some way, even if we don't get to see it during our time, it makes an impact. Just as we see later in that chapter in the story of the growing seed. It's a short story, but this man simply plants the seed. He doesn't know how it grows. He just goes out every morning and it's growing. He doesn't know how it grows. He only knows that it does. And so we're faithful to plant the seeds. And God is faithful to do something with it in his time. So here at the beginning of our summer, here as we really get rolling on things, I want you to know, I want you to hear and to know that wherever you are this summer, you have been uniquely made and are uniquely positioned for God to do something through you. You have been uniquely made and are uniquely positioned for God to do something through you. So with that in mind, here's a few questions that I want us to wrestle with, to pray into in light of that scripture. The first is, how am I uniquely made? How has God made me different? How am I uniquely made? Also, how have I been uniquely positioned right now? What relationships do I have? How has God placed me? And the third is, what might God want to do with that? How have I been uniquely made? How have I been uniquely positioned? And what might God want to do with that? I'm excited to hear the stories of how God does that, how God works through you. I'm excited to hear stories that God writes in your lives this summer. So excited for that. So be sure to keep coming on back and check back in next week here from Mark 5 through 8.